here today to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the founding of Great Peninsula Conservancy and all we do to protect the land and connect people with the land. A few housekeeping things before we get started. We are recording this presentation and it will be made available on our website. So if you don't want to be in a recorded presentation, unvideo yourself or hide yourself or leave. Also, we're going to mute everybody's microphones. It just really helps with audio quality, so there's not that weird feedback thing that happens. And also, if you'd like to make a comment throughout the presentation, you can feel free to do that. We are going to set aside the end of the presentation just for kind of comments and stories. Of course, one of the things that I don't bring to the table is 20 years of institutional knowledge. So I would love it if you all would be willing to participate at the end and share your interests and just stories and thoughts on GPC. You can do that, like I said, at the end, but even during the presentation itself, if you have a question or a comment, you can raise your hand or put something in the chat box and Catherine will relate it to me. Yeah, so that is housekeeping. Before we get started anywhere, it's important that we recognize that the first people that were here on the land that we steward now were the Suquamish tribes, Port Gamble, Sklallam, Skokomish, the Squaxin Island tribe, and the Puyallup tribes. These were the traditional stewards of our land, and they still are today. And it's essential that GPC maintains this really high quality, strong working relationship with our tribal partners. So we appreciate all the work that they do with us. As for what GPC is, after 20 years in the making, what we do is basically we work to protect the most ecologically valuable properties in our working region. Our actual mission statement is protecting forever the natural habitats, rural landscapes, and open spaces of the Great Peninsula of Washington's Puget Sound. Essentially, that translates to we protect the most ecologically valuable land we have here. And that is our salmon streams, our shorelines, our forests, and our green spaces. And I'm going to get into a little bit more of the history later on, but essentially GPC is 20 years old, literally today. We are a nonprofit organization that was formed through the conglomeration of 4 land trusts that were volunteer-led back in 2000 on May 12th. And like I said, we'll get into that later, so I'm not going to talk too much about the 4 organizations at this point, but that's what we are. And as far as what we do today, and I should tell you, the way we're going to do this presentation is I'm going to tell you a little bit, well, what GPC is today, what we do, a little bit about some of the projects that we've been working on lately, go back into the past, look at a few of the highlights, and then talk a little bit about the future of the organization, and then open it up for people's comments. So as far as what we are and what we do today, our mission is to protect those ecologically sensitive areas in our region. And so we do that in 3 basic ways. There's 3 pillars of our organizations. The first is conservation, and then stewardship, and then also in our founding documents, it is one of our mandates is to connect people to the land. And so that's the 3rd pillar in our foundation here. We are an accredited land trust. So for us, that's a big deal. We've been accredited for 5 years, and we're actually just finishing up our reaccreditation process, which is pretty in-depth and complex. Not a whole lot of land trusts across the country have accreditation. So for us, it's important. And basically, it becomes even more important in times like this, where we have something kind of crazy come up, like a pandemic. Well, being accredited means we have to maintain ourselves at a standard that has proper operating reserves and policies and procedures in place that help us weather potential catastrophes. And so the good thing is GPC is in a strong position to make it through this current problem that we all are facing. As far as where we work, our working region is all of Kitsap County, North Mason County, and a little bit of West Pierce County, so Gig Harbor and Key Peninsula. And we also, you know, if you look at our, if you look at our working region map, you can see we are planning on working on the west side of the Hood Canal as well, all the way up to Jefferson County. We haven't really done many projects in that region, but it is a ecologically valuable area, and we'd like to see over the next 5 to 10 years some projects in this region, because right now there are no land trusts that serve up in this area. So we feel it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're protecting that area as well. I'd also mention on this slide, you can see that there's more than 350,000 people living in this region, and that number is only rising. So, the mandate to do land protection is just more important than ever. So we acknowledge that, and we have, continue to work to protect as much as we can and make sure that those most special places are protected. So this conservation legacy map here shows all of the properties that GPC either owns outright, has a conservation easement on, or has assisted one of our agency partners protect over the course of the last actually 40 years. So it's extensive, and this is a really great map. If anybody wants a copy of this map, we would love to mail you a copy, because it just really shows the impact of the organization on our working region. All told, it's more than 10,500 acres of land that's been protected over the course of this time, and it's just it just speaks to the work that everyone's done for 4 decades to make sure that we're protecting our streams and forests. Oops. Much of the property that we've helped protect is actually open to the public to explore. This map is a good example of how it's a combination. What GPC does is kind of threefold. We own properties outright. So if you looked at Clear Creek Trail, for instance, much of Clear Creek Trail is owned fee simple by GPC. Some of it's not. Also on this map, you would see down here, Klingel Wetland Wildlife Refuge. Again, an area that we own and is open for people to come visit and recreate on. And then in addition to that, there's areas like Semmel, Homestead Park, and Banner Forest Heritage Park, areas that have easements. So we do protect those areas, the sensitive wildlife habitat there, but we don't own them outright. And then you'll see other areas up here like Port Gamble Forest Heritage Park. And that would be an example of an area that GPC was instrumental in protecting, but does not hold an easement over. So when it comes to those 3 things that we do, conservation is the one that is most traditional for a land trust. It's the main thrust of our work. That is protecting properties. And so that comes in basically 3 flavors. Again, fee simple acquisitions, that's land that we purchase from a willing seller. So we'll identify a seller who owns a piece of property that has conservation value, and we'll work with them to protect that land, buying it outright, or better in some regard, receiving those as donations. And we're happy to take them as a donation. We're also happy to raise money through grants through community-based capital projects to raise money to do these fee simple acquisitions. I personally like them the best myself because once we own the property, we know we are in control of it, and that there's something satisfying about that for the long term. Also, we do conservation easements. They have a place and they're very important. We have quite a few conservation easements that we maintain. These are fantastic for an owner who would like to see their land protected, but also continues to want to live there, for instance. And so we'll buy the development rights, say, or some other rights that will not allow them to segment up the property or sell it. Well, they can sell it, but they can't develop it. So conservation easements are still really important to GPC. And lastly is agency assists. And this is here where GPC's staff has the technical expertise to write state and federal grants that some of our agency partners may not have, or have just the capacity and time to do that. Well, we can help them write those grants and help them submit the grants. And then at the end of the day, our agency partner will walk away. And those are often county parks or city parks. And that's a really great way to also protect land. So once we have the land under either ownership or under easement, the next thing we do is long-term stewardship of those properties, and that's in perpetuity. So that's a long time. Basically, once we own the property, we put a conservation, or we'll have to go out and do a baseline report. So this map here on the right shows a good example of Chico Creek estuary. Each one of these little red circles represents a place where we did a photo point. And then we'll go back to those properties year after year and make sure that neighbors haven't encroached on those properties. If there's not been any dumping or nobody's done any logging or any other kind of thing that would encroach on either our land that we own fee simple or on any conservation easement. Also, increasingly, as we buy more forested land, we need to be thinking about how to increase the habitat quality for the wildlife that live there. You know, a lot of the properties that are here on the Kitsap Peninsula are legacy Doug fir forests that are not really healthy in some regard. The interior of those forests is oftentimes nearly dead because it was planted as basically a tree farm, right? And so some of the best things we can do in those areas is go in and properly manage those forests to increase species diversity, so there's more ecosystem services being provided to the animals that are living on those. So this is a good example of Grover's Creek Preserve, and the FMUs are these forest management units. Each one of these units has a different forest management practice that we will follow based on the habitat, or the trees that are on those, and then the underlying geology and whether it's wetland, et cetera. And so this is kind of a newer thing for us, and we really are pushing this, and we want to do a really good job of not only owning the properties but stewarding them well. And so that's why we create these management plans. Next, under stewardship, we go out and monitor the properties every year, at least once a year, doing so with volunteers who will go out and monitor these, but also our staff, our stewardship staff, go out and make sure we don't find encroachments along the edge of our properties that abut developed land. And like I said, also just make sure that if there were dumping, that if we would clean that up and just make sure there's no other problems on our property. So that's the monitoring side. And then increasingly is restoration work. And so that restoration really requires that we have community engagement. We're a small staff. We have 8 folks plus a board of 12. That's great, but there's only so much work you can get done when it comes to restoring thousands of acres of property. And so we rely heavily on the community to come out and help us do invasive species removal and native plants, native species plantings, among other things. So those are big, and really 2020, we were ramped up to do just a whole bunch of these. We were really getting into it, trying to engage even more people than in the past. And COVID-19 kind of threw a wrench in the plans there for the spring and the summer. So we're looking to the fall to make up and just have a chance to engage a whole lot of people. So community engagement is a huge part of the organization and what we do. Spring dinner, that was last week, but it didn't happen because of COVID-19. So we have a schedule now for October 1st. Hopefully that'll come together. We shall see. We don't know, but tickets are still on sale. And if you know anybody that wants to sponsor a table or be a sponsor, we'd love to talk to them because we're still taking those. And one way or the other, we'll do something to celebrate, again, the anniversary of our organization. And we also had planned on doing at least 6 walk and talks this year. And again, those are pushed back to the fall. We'll see if they go on at all. But the idea of those is they're not like conditioning walks. We want to get people out onto our properties and give them a chance to connect with the land. So we talk a lot about the natural and cultural history of our region on those walks. They usually they're about an hour, maybe 2 hours. a mile, maybe 2 miles, and we stop so often to talk about all the flora and fauna and geology and everything else that the idea, again, is not to get your heart pumping, it's to be out in nature and maybe learn a little bit about where we live, and you can use that newfound knowledge to connect later when you're walking on a trail. So that's the idea behind the community engagement and what we do. Lastly, I'd mentioned the Next Gen Outdoor Camp. This was to be our 3rd year for the Next Gen Camp. It has been very successful way for us to connect underserved youth in our community with nature. I can tell you from experience that many of the kids with whom we're working on the Next Gen Camp have not had the chance to get into a state park or one of our nature preserves ever. So some of these young people are 13, 14 years old, and they don't ever leave the urban area of like Bremerton. And that is unfortunate because if we can't help develop that conservation ethic in the next generation, it's going to be hard to blame those kids when they grow up, become the leaders, and don't care about the natural world. So it's important that we connect these kids to nature, and we're doing that through this camp. Right now, we're taking a pause for the summer because we're not going to hold our summer camp this year, and really evaluating how best to engage not only these underserved kids, but all the youth in our region. And we're thinking, you know, summer camp is great. Maybe it would be better to put together an in-school enrichment program that's standards-based and really use our preserves as learning laboratories and places where we could connect these kids to nature during the school year, maybe in addition to the summer camp. So, you know, it's just a chance to figure that out. I will mention that membership dollars do not go to support Next Gen, nor will they go to support these other programs that are education-based. We do these through grants, so this is capacity building of the organization. It does not in any way diminish from the core mission, which is to protect and preserve new properties. And I'd only mention that because I've heard from a few folks that, let's leave it at that. All right. Lastly, you know, with what we do, we love to work with organizations. So this is a picture of Lay Wild Rose Preserve. It's down on Gig Harbor. Now, through some help from the Morris Foundation and Gig Harbor Rotary, you know, we're really looking to engage that Rotary Club and the community out on that property to try to remove invasive species, plant natives, and really improve the habitat quality on that. And we're happy to do that with any of the Rotary Club, any of the service clubs, whether it be Lions, Kiwanis, it doesn't matter. Schools, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, we are happy to collaborate with anybody who wants to do that. The more folks that we can engage, we think it just more, you know, it just increases our ability to do quality stewardship. And like I mentioned, our members really are our lifeblood. So for those of you that are here watching this, you're likely a member. So thank you very much for your membership. It makes all the difference for who we are. Like I said, our spring dinner got pushed back. And I will mention here that our conservation award, we have recently renamed that to the Gary Allen Cunningham Conservation Award. Gary has been instrumental in GPC. He's amazing, a real father of the organization. So thank you, Gary, for all you've done. And I'm not going to tell you all who won the conservation award this year. You're going to have to wait until the fall to figure that out. And of course, our Legacy Society. These are all individuals who we've lost over the last 12 years. These are folks who have really have dedicated themselves to the organization, that see the value in what Great Peninsula Conservancy does for our community, and have dedicated some amount of their estate to the organization. I would mention that, you know, I would mention that just COVID-19 makes you think. My wife and I have thought about this. We've recently updated our will, and so we have put in 5% of our estate for Great Peninsula Conservancy. It's not a lot, but it's something. And so, you know, I encourage people to think about it, and it doesn't have to be 80% of what you have. It could be a very small percentage, and that really adds up. It is very meaningful for us and the ability to do the work that we do. So again, acknowledge all these fine individuals who we've lost, but who live on with us in the Legacy Society. I am not going to go into great detail on the projects that we've done recently or the ones that we're doing in the future, because I am sure that you're going to glaze over with too many acres and dollars and everything else. So I'm not doing a deep dive here, but I do want to just point out a few of the projects that we closed on in 2019. First, of course, was Jojoba Shoreline Preserve, 160 acres. Great story of collaboration among federal, state partners, nonprofit, us being GPC, and then the community who also chipped in $150,000 or more to make this property a reality. It's a really amazing place. We'd love to take you out there. We're going to do it in the walk and talks as soon as those get back up, and show people the shoreline and the upland. It's really amazing. Big Beef Preserve was closed on last year, and that protects quite a bit of the nearshore up in the Hood Canal. I would say the Miller Bay Preserve is another great example of a success story where we worked closely with the Friends of Miller Bay to protect that 13-acre property. That's great, and it continues the footprint of land preservation in the Miller Bay watershed. And lastly, I just want to point out East Fork Rocky Creek Preserve. This is 34 acres down here near Key Peninsula, and you're going to see that one here in just a second. So that was 34 acres. That one's closed. We own it. I was out there last week with the stewardship staff cleaning up a bunch of garbage in a boat and everything else. But that place is looking immaculate now. It's really great, and we'd love to get you out there as well. It's beautiful, really. So here, as we move into 2020, the good thing about 2020 from a pandemic perspective is our conservation work really hasn't been knocked back at all. We were able to do all of the grant writing and the meetings for those grants, defending our proposals all through these virtual meetings. So we're still moving ahead with quite a few closings that we plan to do this year that equals a few $1 million in grant funds that we're bringing in. In particular, I would just point to Misery Point here, which is right up here. Fantastic project. It's 20 acres. It has feeder bluffs that produce sand and provide nutrients for the eelgrass beds that are down here, and then a saltwater lagoon as well, which is a unique habitat type for the area. That is just a really exciting project, and we are close. Recently, we were awarded a National Coastal Wetlands grant for that of $1 million, and we feel very confident that the remaining $700,000 will come in through some state-funded grants that we have applications in for, and we're feeling pretty good about. So that's a great project, and we're really excited to see that one close. And the second one I'm going to point to specifically is the Rocky Creek acquisition. This is another really fantastic example of the kind of projects that we want to be focusing on in the future. Here again is that 34-acre project that we closed on in December of 2019. It was the anchor for this 163 acres adjacent to it. And so with those connected, we'll have quite a lot of a salmon stream that'll be protected in that region, and it's all forested. It's just a wonderful area, and we hope to, again, get people out on those properties to see what your membership dollars are protecting. Yeah. Okay, and like I said, that's enough of what's going on today. If you want to hear more, give me a call. I'm happy to talk to you about it. Any of the projects that we have going on, I'm always happy to discuss those with anyone who takes the time to pick up the phone and call me. When we're looking back here on the organization and where we came from, here's a couple of documents I found that were scanned and buried away on our server. Here you can see this is the actual article of merger that created Great Peninsula Conservancy. It's kind of interesting the way it happened. and I'm going to preface all this stuff right now by saying, like, talking about the past to people who were there when it happened, but I wasn't, is like blithely walking into a land mine field, I think. So, bear with me here. You can see from this article, or the articles of merger, that it was indeed May 12th, 2000, when the Hood Canal Land Trust, Kitsap Land Trust, and Peninsula Heritage Land Trust merged into Indianola Land Trust, and then Indianola Land Trust then changed its name to Great Peninsula Conservancy. So it's kind of an interesting history of the way the organization came to be, was the combination of these four organizations into one. I also threw in this, I found it, it's kind of cool, the articles of incorporation for Indianola Land Trust, showing that it was incorporated back in, I guess that you might not be able to see the date, but it was 1980. That's where we come up with 40 years. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know when Indianola, I'm sorry, I don't know when Hood Canal was formed, or Kitsap Land Trust for that matter. So love to hear that later on. I do want to thank you all, the folks that had the foresight and wherewithal and the time and effort. It's not easy to do this, especially as everybody was doing it voluntarily, and not getting paid, I guess is what I mean. Also, nobody was forcing you, but it was an effort, that you all did because you care about the mission. I'm sorry that these pictures are not that good. This is as good a resolution as we can get, but this is a picture of the celebration 20 years ago, probably close to today, when GPC came to be. And I really think it's important to note, like, 20 years later, our organization is still thriving, has more members than ever. And I think it's a testament to the fact that getting people out onto the land, especially young people like these ladies, really helps to build that conservation ethic and develop that next generation, because we all know that happens so fast that it doesn't take long to age and become the people that, you were young, and all of a sudden you need that next generation to backfill. It's happening all the time. And it's great to see that 20 years ago, y'all were thinking about that, and it's continuing to this day. And we haven't lost sight of that. And we realize how important it is to continue to engage young folks. So people have asked me quite a bit, where does this name Great Peninsula come from? And I'm not going to go into the details of the story again, because I don't want to screw that up, but because I've heard different stories. But essentially, on a nautical map, sometime in the deep, misty past, on this nautical map, or one very much like it, is written the word Great Peninsula. And it does show the area that we work on, and all four of those land trusts came together, and it is an apt name. I don't know what I put this pirate secret chest on here just because I found this while I was going through like 30 CDs of old photographs from 20 years and trying to pick out the best stuff. And so many pictures I'd find and think, what is this? I wonder, this is curious. And these people are doing amazing things, but we don't know who they are. So I'll tell you, if anybody wanted to help curate that would be a heck of a project for all time. But yeah, that's what it is. And it's kind of also interesting to look at 20 years ago when our first logo was put in. This is what it was. It's basically the same as what it is today. And so, I like the logo. I'm sure you all do too. But maybe if you know somebody that is a graphic designer and want to do some pro bono work, maybe they could come over and help us think about an updated logo. Okay, so as far as these projects that we did in the past, I want to start off. I'm going to highlight 4, and then again we're going to open it up, and anybody that wants to share can, and I encourage you to do that. The first one I want to point to is the Ellis Conservation Easement. This was 183 acres, and this predates Great Peninsula Conservancy. So this was written back in 1990 by the Hood Canal Land Trust, and it was even though the Ellis Conservation Easement, and I should mention the person in the middle there, that's Kit Ellis. She's our current board president. serving the end of her second term. So thank you, Kit, for all that you do and have done and continue to do for GPC. You're amazing. But Kit's mom, Phyllis, wanted to put an easement on her property back in 1990, and there was no land trust in the Gig Harbor Peninsula to do that. So the Hood Canal Land Trust agreed to do it with the understanding that when someday an organization would come along that would be better suited for the geography, then they would transfer that easement to that organization. And that was sort of the, that wasn't the only reason that Peninsula Heritage Land Trust came into being, but it was one of the reasons for the foundation of that land trust as well. So I think that's kind of an interesting story. And it's kind of also interesting just to think that Phyllis, you know, Kit's mom lost her husband during World War II, and you know, New Jersey did eminent domain on her property in New Jersey to build the pike out there, and that's what ended up having. They moved out here, bought their 183-acre parcel with a pond, and then you know, lived on it for a long time. And then, you know, Phyllis and Kit have that ethic, and they wanted to protect the property, and realized that they could do that through a conservation easement. So it's like a perfect story of people coming out, finding a beautiful piece of land, and then protecting it. Another story very similar to that would be Cowling Creek and Virginia Cowling, who's pictured here, and the work that she did to protect land in our region. Unfortunately, Virginia, you know, she passed away a decade ago now, I believe. Don't quote me exactly, but you know, it's been a while, and what we see with her and what she tried to do was the protection of the Cowling Creek Preserve, which was done in multiple steps over many years. And really a lot of that credit has to go to the Friends of Miller Bay, who helped work very closely with the GPC, and this is even before GPC existed, I believe, to help protect these parcels and just take anything that's available and plop it into that original 15 or so acres, eventually forming a 42-acre preserve that's open to the public and is really beautiful. If you haven't gotten out there, I highly recommend you go for a hike on the trails in the preserve. It's also worth mentioning the Virginia Cowling's bequest, which I believe went to Friends of Miller Bay, became the seed money for the protection of Grover's Creek Preserve. And that, you know, you can just see the legacy of Virginia goes far beyond just this one preserve. It goes into the whole watershed, and it's just a great story of somebody that cared enough and really did it. And also, again, thanks to all you folks that are in Friends of Miller Bay who are also members of GPC. You guys are an invaluable partnership, and we always love working with you. A couple more here. This is an example of the Klingel Beards Cove project. This would be, you know, the whole thing is 95 acres. And this was one of the examples of an actual pretty substantial restoration project where an area that was diked and turned into a farm field was restored to a wetland. And so you can see all the meanders up in this area. Those were all put back in, and it becomes such a fantastic success story because it's one of the few areas in our region that you can see an improvement of habitat insofar as you can see a rebound of the endangered Hood Canal summer chum. So that species is seeing you know, some uptick in their numbers. And so there is a real success story here with this restoration project. And here's Kate Coleman, figured put her in there. Kate held the organization together for many years through the aughts, I suppose you'd say. And so we thank her for that. Next would be the Kitsap Forest and Bay project, one of the largest efforts that I think this region has ever seen. It brought together over 40 organizations, just I can only imagine sort of like herding cats. And, you know, all of that thanks goes to Sandra Staples-Bortner, who was the linchpin, who made that made that happen, kept everybody meeting, helped facilitate all of those individuals and organizations, helped raise the funds to make that whole process, you know, a success. And again, it was a decade in the making kind of thing. And culminated in Port Gamble Forest Heritage Park being protected, North Kitsap Heritage Park, and also GPC's Grover's Creek Preserve, which again is just a magical place when you get inside here. It's like it's something really special. And lastly, it would be the Peterson Farm. And I wanted to point to this one as well, because this was a real community effort that lasted decades in the making, with Mr. Peterson wanting to see his farm remain a farm and not be subdivided. It's one of the last open spaces in Silverdale that continues to this day to be open space. 115 acres of land under easement that that require the property to remain in farmland status, and that's a huge success. That's a huge win for the community to have that protected. Otherwise, by this time, it almost certainly would have been divided up into 13 parcels and created into little, McMansions, for lack of a better term, housing development. Put it that way. So I think that's another one to point to and say, this was a great example of GPC writing and securing a federal grant, and then working with the community to raise the rest of the money needed to put this farm under easement. And I really think this is a cool photo down here. It shows the farm, and it shows the homestead a long time ago, back in the day. So, when we look to the future, what we're going to do in GPC over the next 10, 20 years, as far as I am concerned, is to make land conservation our focal point. It's more important than ever because of the development pressure we see in our region, that we continue to identify and protect the most valuable lands here. I would also like to see us be able to do more stewardship, and so that doesn't detract from our ability to do the conservation work. I would just love to see us be able to engage more people on the land. And lastly, it is in our articles of incorporation that part of our mission is to use our preserves to provide opportunities for people to recreate and to educate the public. And I think that's a really important thing. I think our board of directors now believes it's important, as did my predecessor, Sandra. It is important, in connecting people to nature will continue to be one of our primary goals. I don't know, there's different ways we can do that. I'm in the process of working to secure an AmeriCorps grant. We'll see if that comes through or not. But if it does, that'll bring in some additional human resources to the organization. And it's a multiple year process to make one of these grants come up and get going. So don't look for AmeriCorps members running around next year. But in the near future, we hope to see some teams of restoration technicians running around our parcels, helping to guide members and volunteer groups to do restoration work, and also a team of educators who can go into the schools, run our summer camps, and continue to work with youth and adult groups alike to get more people on to GPC properties and just use them as laboratories to educate folks. So that's where we're going in the future. I'd also mentioned this year we're working on our conservation plan. Luckily, we just received a grant, $14,000 to pay for staff time to do a quality job of putting together a conservation plan. And what we're going to do with the conservation plan is just take a holistic approach using GIS to look at the entire region, look at all of the parcels, and rank those, the whole area, rank it based on conservation value. So we'll have a matrix with different parameters, and we'll look at the whole area. And that way we can determine what are the biggest pieces of property that have the most value that we can protect with the resources that we have as an organization. And then we're going to just laser beam onto those because really the amount of effort you put into preserving a 5-acre parcel is the same amount pretty much that you put into preserving a 500-acre parcel. And so with that math, we really want to make sure that we're focusing and not getting distracted, which I am the first one to do, is to see the shiny new little 5-acre thing and be like, oh, let's get that. But this will just help us really streamline it and focus on doing the most with the resources that we have. And having said that, also we're going to send out a survey in June that you'll all be getting, that'll ask you questions about what you want to see in the conservation in our region through GPC. So that's coming your way pretty soon. And so from all of the staff and from me and from our board, I didn't put the pictures of the board on here, sorry guys. But from all of us at GPC, we thank you. You guys are our members. You're the people who make our organization what it is and allow us to do the work. You support us, and I can tell you we have a fantastic staff right now that are continuing to work very hard and diligently through this pandemic, and we're still getting just a ton of work done. So yeah, I'm proud of all of them and happy to see all the good stuff we're getting done. So here we're going to move into this next section and see if anybody wants to make any comments, correct any of the things that I've said that were incorrect. That would be great. And also just share any stories. So you can see the directions here will say, you can click at the bottom, there's a participant bar. If you open that up, the toolbar, there's a thing that says raise your hand. Catherine will unmute you if you get there, and then you can say what you like, or you can just use the chat box. That'll go directly to Catherine, and then she can unmute you from that point. We'd love to hear a few stories. I would ask that you keep them pretty brief, like 3, maybe 5 minutes if you got something to say. That way multiple people can come in. There's 30 people in here right now. So, that would be appreciated. And at that, I'm going to shut up and see if anybody has anything to say and stop sharing my screen. So lastly, here are contact information with the organization's phone number. Here's my email. So if you have anything you'd like to share, I'd love to hear it. And one last thing, if it is our 20th anniversary, we do care about the history of the organization. That institutional knowledge is important. And so if you have a story or pictures or anything you'd like to share, I'd love to just chat and maybe record it and share that up on our website or through social media. It's just a great way to, just focus on the organization and share it with the wider community. So, okay, stop sharing.
Okay.
All right, that was a mouthful, it's fast.
We do have a couple questions, and I'll just read them out here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Can you talk about the development future of the Great Peninsula and if there is a role for GPC to play in advocating for sensible zoning and growth planning?
Yes, I think that there's absolutely a role for GPC to play in that regard. I mean, it stretches a little bit our mission, but I think it's on point. We should be in zoning meetings talking about the value of smart zoning and protecting those ecologically valuable properties that we care about. I think GPC, we're not unaware of the fact that, growth is happening and there are areas in this region which are appropriate for people to build on. That's fine. That's progress. But having said that, we really want to make sure that we are protecting and know what's happening when it comes to zoning decisions at the county level. And so we love to do that. Now, one of the limiting factors there is just how much time do we have on our hands. And that's kind of where the community comes to play. So, when you all see something that's on an agenda and you want us to be there, we need you to ask us to be there, or you can go and give us a report on what's going on and help us come up with policy papers and the like. I don't see any reason why we can't do that. It's just more of a bandwidth and being able to see what's happening in 3 different counties and multiple municipalities. So that's got to be a group effort there.
Great. Second question. Projects thus far have been concentrated in the mid and upper Kitsap Peninsula. Can you talk about the factors influencing that and any plans for pursuing additional projects on the Key Peninsula and Mason County?
I don't know why the proper, the parcels that have been protected were the ones that were chosen. I can tell you that under and I can see some of you, I can see your faces, you're thinking about it. You guys have an answer out there. But I can tell you that under the conservation plan, we're looking at Gig Harbor and Key Peninsula specifically, because they're Key Peninsula in particular. There's a lot of work that we're doing down there right now. If I flipped back to some of those slides, you'd see there's hundreds of acres being protected on Falusi Bay and Rocky Creek. We're putting a conservation easement on a farm down there as well. And we learned a lot from, institutionally from the last farm conservation easements we put on, and we're making sure that we write those in as smart a way as possible to make sure that the conservation values are upheld. But like I said, what we're going to do with this whole conservation plan is look at every acre in the area. I mean, we're going to look at who owns these things. It's going to take hundreds of hours, really, which is great because it's covered by a grant that we have secured. But we're really going to look at all of these properties, figure out which has the highest conservation value, and we're going to work on those. We are right now working with Penn Met Parks to look at a couple properties that are 100 plus acres on Gig Harbor to see if they'd like to be the takeout partner. We're finding it's a little difficult with the grants that are available for us to buy some of these because they just don't fit well with the criteria of the grants we have. But there are other grants that are available for local parks that would work great for some of these parcels. And so, it's just it's a good chance to do some more work on Gig Harbor Peninsula. Of course, you add partners and everything just gets, orders of magnitude more complicated. But that's what we do, and we're working with those partners right now.
Okay. Next question. As I recall, there were several connected parcels that were originally part of the Port Gamble project, but not all were included. Is there any additional work planned to complete those acquisitions?
Yes. So there are several properties up that are still owned by Pope, soon to be Rainier. So there's a West Port Gamble block that we're working with Pope to acquire, straight up fee simple. But actually, one of the other options there is to work with Kitsap County on that acquisition. And this is another example where Kitsap County doesn't have the resources, the staff time to do that acquisition, but the grants that we identify are better for local parks. So this is one where we pitch to them, like, we'll do the grant writing. We can tie it up with a bow and give it to you. You need to submit it to the state. And so we're still negotiating with the county on that. That's the West Port Gamble block. It's just to the west of the park. It would create a western access to Port Gamble Forest Heritage Park. There's also the Divide property, which is 500 acres that sits just to the west of Grover's Creek Preserve. That's a great opportunity to protect a huge chunk of land. Unfortunately, it was clear cut in the last couple of years. So from a grant perspective, it's difficult. I can tell you, we're trying to find new sources of funding that we haven't tapped into before, like different sources of Navy money that could potentially bring millions of dollars to some of our projects. So we're working actively with some of these new partners there. But then there's another one, which is, well, those are the big ones that are up in the original amount of land that was, or as far as I understand, was originally slated to go into the Kitsap Forest and Bay project and didn't make it in. So, that's an additional 600 or 700 acres that we're working toward right now. We don't have them on the slides because we're just, in that initial phase, and it's complicated because of the transfer from Pope to Rainier. We were doing pretty well. Now we just have to see how, if Rainier wants to work with us.
Okay, and then next I'm going to unmute, let's see here, Steve. All right,
Hello?
go ahead, Steve.
I guess I'm unmuted. I just wanted to mention to the group, there I see some names on here of people that I knew. No Tex Lewis, but Tex Lewis passed away a few days ago, probably at Liberty Shores. Mary Earl may be online and may have more details, but Tex was one of the visionaries and early founders of the Clear Creek Task Force and that effort to obtain parcels of land and preserve and put in trails all the way from Dyes Inlet up towards the end area up by Peterson Farm and someday maybe even further. So Tex passed away, and I think there'll be an article in the Sun in a few days, but I don't know. Mary Earl's on. If she could be unmuted, she may have some more details. Yeah, Mary's unmuted. Mary, do you have information? I heard your voice.
And you can see Tex way in the back. He's the one with the white hat on. He's the good guy.
Yeah, I don't think this is, we're not getting you, Mary.
My internet is really unstable, so I'm going to leave it there.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm sorry to hear that, Steve and Mary. That I think I mentioned a little bit in the presentation, the Clear Creek Task Force, but I didn't, again, thank you guys as much as I should have for all the work that, you guys do to protect and maintain the trail, and whether it's on GPC land, or whether it's on the county properties. That's just the invaluable work that all you guys do. And I know Tex was instrumental in having the whole thing put together, Steve. So sorry to hear of his loss.
Phil Best
Thank
and
you.
Gary Cunningham were heavily involved in a whole lot of Clear Creek Task Force documentation and legal easements, particularly Gary getting the easements all set up for us over the years, and maybe others. So thank you.
Okay, that's everything I've got now. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to raise your virtual hand or send it to the chat.
Looks like Pat Lance may be trying to say something. Pat, I'm going to unmute you, okay?
Hi there.
Hi. Would you like to add something, Pat?
This was fun. I would like to know if you're planning on any kind of a walk exploration in as soon as possible at Misery Point. That is a place I've never been, and
Yeah, it was on our list for this year. We hope to close on Misery Point before the end of the year. Probably will be December. That one's a little, I'm not going to go into the details of the grant funding and stuff because it's complicated with some contingency funds that the state has, et cetera. It may be 2021 before we're done with that, depending upon how much money gets, clawed back from the budget deficit, et cetera, et cetera. But as soon as that property's open, we'd love to get people out onto it. It's beautiful. And, really we want to make that into one of our landscape ambassador properties where we can get kids, adults, everybody out there, and just turn it into a place where people can go and learn and connect with nature. It's lovely.
could you tell us how it came to be to be available to GPC?
I don't know the beginning of that story. I just know that the current property owner is conservation minded, and she wants to see it protected. And you know, we were able to find the money to buy it. I don't even know. I think it's fair market value. It's $1.7 million. It's probably fair market value. I don't know, but you know, she wants to see it protected, and she doesn't want to see it subdivided, and so it will be. I don't know.
Thank you.
A related question: if the deal goes through, are you going to rename Misery Point to something nicer?
Yes, we are. It's important. So I can tell you, as far as I understand, the story of Misery Point is not a nice one. You know, it was that the native folks that were living there in the region they contracted smallpox, and then were forced into Misery Point, which is a small peninsula. It was turned into sort of like you call it convalescence area, but you know, I mean, a lot of death happened out there, and that's the name Misery Point. Now, if somebody wants to update me on that, I'm happy to put your hand up and tell me, but that's the story as far as I understand it, and it's not a real lovely one. Yeah, I think it would be more appropriate for us to talk with the original, you know, the tribal partners that lived here before, and see what they think it should be named, and go with the suggestion they make. I think that would be great if we had in our portfolio. If you look at the names of all of our preserves, there are very few native names, and I think it would be appropriate to name a few like that.
Okay. Next, I've got a question from Sandra, who is now unmuted.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see some faces and hear some other voices. Thanks to Nate and Catherine for this excellent presentation, too. I'm wondering about Felucci Bay, the Dalton property. Are we on track to advance that project sometime soon?
We are. It's on our list for 2020. We should be closed before the end of the year. It's a good question. It's another beautiful piece of Felucci Bay. The money's all secured. Now it's just going through the process of having. What we're going to do is combine the new Dalton property with Hammerson properties, right? So we're going to do a boundary line adjustment. We're going to combine those parcels, and so in order to do that, we have to have new survey work done, and people aren't getting out and doing surveys as much, so we've got a little bit slowed down there. But we should be closed on the Dalton property. I don't know exactly when, but it should be before the fall, almost certainly.
That'll be exciting to look forward to that.
I know, and one of the things we planned on doing this summer was, as soon as Dalton was, secured, we were looking forward to doing, a GPC member only paddle, where we'd rent a bunch of kayaks and get some professionals out there with us, and then just paddle from the port right there up into the bay and have lunch. That'd be a lot of fun. And you could, of course, just walk in and come down and enjoy lunch and explore the property as well. But, that plan's on hold. We definitely want to do it in the summer, and we'll see. We'll see what the fall looks like. We'd love to do that then as well. So, yeah, the Felucci Bay, that's huge. We're working with Melissa Hammerson. We're buying up quite a bit of the bay. The whole thing is just coming into play. So we're working with her right now to acquire several other parcels that are not available through grants for various reasons, and then we're continuing to work on ESRP grants and some of the other ones, the usual suspect grants, to purchase up more of the surrounding parcels, so we can completely buy the bay, which I realize, Sandra, was your original plan, and so we're continuing to prioritize Felucci for sure.
Great to hear. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, up next, I have unmuted Phil. You're up.
Thanks. Just to answer Pat Lance's question about the Misery Point area. There's a member of the Hood Canal Environmental Council Board, Terry Reeve, who grew up just opposite that point. And as a young man, as a boy, would go over there and take oysters and clams and enjoy the area. And he became a fisheries expert and made his career in fisheries. And now he's back and he's retired and is a member of the Hood Canal Environmental Council Board. And he presented that issue of acquiring that through the Hood Canal Environmental Council. And then we worked with the GPC Conservation Director at that time, Jonathan, to see about acquiring it. And now it's being pursued. So this has been a successful thing. As far as the name goes, the Misery Point was, as my understanding, was a misery because of what the Native Americans went through during, I think it was the pandemic or smallpox, the smallpox area issue for them. And it was named because of their experience. So they may have difficulty changing its name because it means a lot to them. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go with whatever. That's what we're talking about. If they want to keep it Misery Point in English, then that's great. We have no qualms with the name Misery Point. It just it is evocative, and we just want to make sure we have the input of the tribal partners.
They have a native name.
Yeah, it may have a native name that we don't know how to pronounce, but we'll see.
Yeah. Thank you, Phil. All right, anything else, Catherine?
Yeah, we have a question here about Peterson Farm. Let's see here. So my question pertains to the Peterson Farm. I have witnessed devastating clear cutting that certainly cannot be in the best interest to conservation concerns, and the once pristine nature of the original farming has been destroyed forever. That's certainly not carrying out the wishes of Dorothy and Jerry Peterson. I was very close to the Petersons and I know what their wishes were. Now the logging has started again. Are you going to honor the conservation plan on this property, or is the devastation going to continue?
Yes. Yes, we are going to honor the conservation plan. We will follow the letter of the conservation plan, which is the law, and we will enforce it as best we can. The way that the conservation easement is written, the land was protected from development. So there's 115 acres of the 165 acre farm that is no longer able to be developed. Those rights have been extinguished, and we will protect that. The trees were not included in the conservation easement. So the right to harvest the lumber is not GPC's. It's not GPC's right to protect the harvest of the timber. It is the right of the property owner to harvest as much as they want, as long as they do it under state law. That's the situation. And so we've been hearing a lot lately on social media and phone calls about folks that, you know, used to play out there, and it's in their backyard, and they cared very deeply about the trees in the area there. And while I empathize with that sentiment, we didn't get into this line of work to clear cut timber. Nevertheless, what we have to do is follow the easement. And, you know, when you read it, there's the intent of the easement, and then there's what is written in the easement. And what we're going to do is follow what's written in the easement. And the easement allows for the harvest of timber. So there's really nothing we can do about it at this point. And we will continue to protect the easement as it's written. So I know that's not a satisfying answer for a lot of folks in the community that see the trees get cut down. I would always point people back to the fact that we wouldn't be having this conversation about the farm if the easement had not been placed 5 or 10, 5 or 6 years ago. At this point, they would be completely cut up and developed into housing. So, I would just remind people of that point when they're thinking about the 20 acres of forest that was cut in 2016, the 3 acres that was cut on Earth Day this year, and the remaining 45 acres that will almost certainly be logged in the future.
Okay, that's all the questions I have in the chat.
So well, all right, on that fun note, and nothing else. Anybody else have anything to say? Any thoughts or stories that you'd like to weave? All right. Well, if not, I'd just like to thank you all again for being so important to GPC. It's an honor for me to be here. My 1-year anniversary comes up in June 3rd, actually. So it's coming right up to a year already. So time flies, but it's been an honor to be here, and we'll continue to do the good work that you all set up in the past, and we'll keep that going in the future. Thank you all for participating, and at this point, we're going to stop recording and end the meeting. So thanks, everybody. Bye.